live. Okay. Hello, everyone. Let's begin today's episode. The title of today's episode, it's today, is Silence of an Ever-Present Nature. And I have spoken about ever-present minds. I've spoken about the attributeless attention of a sort of non-existential quality. And so I guess this is how I'll dive into this talk. First of all, what is wrong with the live stream? Okay, we're good. You see, human beings, we are design-oriented creatures. That means fundamentally any way we become animate, any way we become active, it will follow a sort of, our activities have designs pretty much. And these designs in some sense lead to human vision. Right now, the knowledge, the data that I have to experience about it's not just certain lifeless images. You see, your relationship with knowledge can be filled with life or can be lifeless. Your experience with knowledge becomes lifeless when you try to hold on to the known, you know? Anybody who tries to hold on to knowledge, you will lose it quickly. Anything you actually really hold on to, because the point of life is not the effect of it, it's its cause. It's like what matters more in your life is not if you have the right tools or not, it's what you are doing with the tools that you already have. You know, the title is kind of funny. I'm talking about silence, but I'm talking about it, you know? It's like, yo, this dude who talks about silence. You see, I consider that, to be honest, our intelligence is limited to the design. It doesn't matter how smart you are, whatever cultural program, social program, environmental program you were raised in, that has become a voice of your ego. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, it's very fascinating. I'm not just speaking purely as a subjective being, and I'm not speaking purely as an objective being. You know, of course, I say we have two eyes that see the same, so there's the subjective and objective component of the same moment. I believe the subjective realm and the objective realm are simultaneous. That means as I'm speaking to you, I am not just a body that is howling a mind through a brain around. I'm also a mind that is projecting its body in accordance to decisions of a vast observance. So we are actually like spheres of, we are like, people are not people. They're spherically endless zones of awareness. We are zones of intelligence, you can say. I want to say some things about silence. That statement makes me laugh every time. But I'll tell you this about silence. There's a poet named Rumi, Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. I find his writings are possess a mystical depth that is unheard of. And he says, silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. Keep in mind, this dude was alive 700 years ago, like 900 to 700 years ago. And because this person was alive then, in some sense, his views and philosophies, religion was a big influence. We can say that religion, I consider language to have architecture. So we can say the words that were found from religions had a very big architecture. They were cathedral-sized concepts. Okay, now our society has made sky rises. We have had certain viewpoints that have moved beyond the firmness of a sort of language dictating things. right? So Rumi says silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation. What he means by that is that anything else, this is the thing about silence and noise. Noise is dualistic, silence is singular. Silence is a singular dimension of presence, but when you speak, it's as if there is a layer of silence and the words are found in the sounds are found in the space of the silent, in the space of the silence. So what that means is just like we have empty space that holds matter, we have silence that holds noise and sound. We look at matter, it is shaped, it has a certain figure, a certain design. Then we look at, in some sense, the personality beyond the presence, and we see that has design as well. So what I'm trying to say is that our sounds, our voices, they are animate, but they are animate and they travel through space in the way at least we direct them as characters in a story. One of the most important words, you got to understand the relationship of the concept with the context. Or even with certain actors in the entertainment sector where they bring a sort of subtext to their performance. You see, like we have actors like Marlon Brando who are method actors. This dude has to indulge himself. He has to literally make the external seem like his internal, and then he accesses the internal. But there's some people who they can access the internal from any moment. That means if I know how to solve the Rubik's Cube and you give me a Rubik's Cube, it doesn't matter when I solved it before, how I solved it before. The mind has a sort of application in that moment. You know, in moments where you can't apply your mind, simply it's because you don't have the power of knowledge. So what does that mean? That means you've literally gone into a business meeting, but you have no idea who the people are. And you are at a disadvantage, for example. You know? It's all about not just knowing what things are, by the way, but knowing what the intentions of things are. You see, if I wanted to, for example, look at let's say an ant. I remember when I was young, I was writing and an ant climbed on a piece of paper. And when you hold the piece of paper to the top, the ant goes to the top. You know, the insect climbs to the top of the paper. I don't know if that's clear, but what I'm saying is, like, imagine you had a pen in your hand and you're holding this pen horizontally, the ant is climbing. When you hold it vertically, there's a big chance that the insect will climb to the top of the pen. Human beings are objects that harbor subjective intentions. These subjective intentions is where the intelligence of their movement is coming from. So on some level, freedom of speech is more important than freedom to be physically able to do things. Let me tell you why. Because you need your mind. And if your mind is limited, I have been literally, let me tell you what the game of nations is. Every nation has sworn allegiance to a certain personality. That personality has sworn a certain allegiance to the validity of a certain truth. You see, so the reason is, it's like, just like we see the United Nations, it's like people, imagine we got a person from every branch, like we got a scientist, a philosopher, a religious person, you know, an artist, a blacksmith, like we got all these all these kinds of people in the same room. We would see that the way they apply their intelligence to the world has a different cultural program, has a different social program. And to be honest, it is not easy to be a politician. On some level, it is very easy to say politicians are corrupt assholes. But on another level, it's not that easy, because that person has had to overcome the values of their life to be able to care about the value of other people's lives. This is why some of the best politicians are people who are parents, because they understand the value of the world they're leaving behind. You know, and politicians who give into corruption, they're just fools. They're just scared fools. I'm telling you, only a scared fool has to show he has power. There is no one. If any moment you see somebody being tough in front of you, that man is the most scared person in the room. That is why he's acting tough. I am telling you. And of course, there is different levels of toughness. Human beings are not all designed the same. That means even though I'm giving this talk, it doesn't mean I'm saying, yo, this is about the edges of language, to be honest. And that's why I'm speaking about society and civilization, because it has to do a lot with how fast language evolves. What if I told you in 100 years from now there would be a language known as a geometrical language? I've been known to say geometry is the next great language of all languages. The reason I say that is because meaning travels from dimension to dimension. Right now we think we are only here. We think human species is the ultimate species. We think we are the gods of the creatures on earth because we are the creature that is the most godly blessed. We have consciousness in ways that other species do not. Instantly we have become aliens to them. And so we have become aliens on our planet. We have become a stranger in our own home. And that is when civilization truly enters revolution. It enters the internal revolution. These are the next revolutions. In society, we usually have an external revolution, a giant external revolution inspired by a small internal revolution. Literally, some guy comes and says, yo, I don't like how things are going on. And everybody's like, yeah. And so there's revolution, French Revolution, different kinds of revolutions, However, there is a symphony being played behind the dance of chaos. And that symphony has an order even the chaos will not understand. There will be people on this planet who will not care about life. They will see machines before we are machines. And that is the failure of the species. That we have failed to see what we are in a world that is left here for us. I do not know if there are gods. I do not know if there are other extraterrestrial beings from other dimensions watching us. I don't know if we are ants under a rock where a giant being is watching us. I do not know. But I know one thing, that it doesn't matter how God stands or man. We are all standing in the unknown. Because it is found in the most ancient mystical and metaphysical thought that God brought itself out into the world to be known, as if the mistake of man was the correct thing that God should have done. As if the mistake of man was not the mistake of God. The mistake of the microcosm is not the mistake of the macrocosm. It is the dance. It is the dance of the individual into the collective mind. And your species, you as a natural being, there's a burden you carry. There are mountains on your shoulder that you do not see. The future does not need a king. The future is the king. Ideas bow down to one another. You have not seen this because most people, they look at ideology and they think it can only be contained in language or image or color. There's only few languages you have to learn on this planet, And when I say languages, I'm saying languages in the sense of existential design. These are languages that have to do with the psychology of the experiencer more than with the objects and subjects of experience. It's fine. You can look at an object and call it a cup. But can you go to a person and just ascribe any name you want to them? You can't. Let me tell you why. Because that person harbors a reality behind their eyes. People are like objects that are have subjectivity behind them. This is why, to be honest, you need to honor every child as if they are the king, and you need to all honor every old man as if they used to be king. So I'm telling you, there's something that Western secular societies lack that I've seen certain Eastern, of course, less educated societies to have. And it is how much of the decency of the actual human nature is preserved based on the type of social cultural program introduced to the citizen. So you see, you're a creature, I could say fundamentally that we as people are like battery packs, energy packs, okay? We're just these energy packages, okay? So this package of energy. Now this package of energy opens its eye in the day, and let me tell you something interesting. Have you noticed nobody is racist or sexist or any of the ists when they're in deep sleep? It's as if either the cruelest person and the kindest person, they are the same when they are in deep sleep. Literally, the inactivity of the brain's projective sense of self, is a validity. So I'm telling you that we can be alive on this planet in a way where we don't have thoughts. We just call that sleep. You see? So like all these people trying to meditate, get super enlightened, guess what? Every time I sleep, I have reached the ultimate. I have entered the samadhi of eons. Because eventually it has to do with the relationship of the existential and the non-existential. And the non-existential is being considered to be in our experience, because the secular society has worshipped matter. Because they have worshipped matter, the world is pretty much divided between idol worship and ideal worshippers. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, there are certain people who feel matter is the prime purpose of manifestation. And there's some people who feel matter is a bridge. A bridge is not the purpose. A bridge is what you use to get to the purpose. There's a story, you know, I remember I was talking to a friend about kings. And when we started to talk about kings, we eventually came to the metaphysical framework. For me, a conversation is an exploration. Therefore, you cannot explore with too much baggage. You cannot climb that mountain if you have the weight on the world on your back. You see, for me, the story, the Greek mythological story of Atlas, this dude who had to carry the weight of the world on his back every day to the top of a mountain, like roll this boulder up, and then the boulder will fall down. Like this creature comes and eats this vulture or something comes and eats the guy's liver, and then he falls down, and again the whole thing starts and starts and starts. And the story of that is in some sense how a person in this life can get themselves lost in a loop. And this is the fascinating concept. This is one of the most fascinating sentences I feel I can say in this lifetime. That infinity has become real sooner than eternity. That means a temporary being can experience the optical illusion of an infinite spectrum. Okay, so what that means is when I go and stand between, I remember when I was a young kid, that was the first time I got access to a sort of infinity. I went and stood between two mirrors, and I saw kind of the optical illusion of endless reflections in the mirror, right? So when I saw that optical illusion, it was as if my mind, sensory-wise, could project an infinity as sort of the finite and being endless. Okay, so there's different ways you can be infinite. If you want to be immortal, that's literally like with a vertical consideration of time. So what that means is an immortal person, in one dimension, the person is endlessly continuing. We call that immortality. Now, infinity is what we say when that person is, there are endless versions of themselves. We tend to think we're a singular cause going towards a multidimensional effect, but it's actually we are a multidimensional cause going into a singular effect. The whole notion of enlightenment was that you are a creature fundamentally based on various systems working at the same time. These various systems have segmented a sort of, they appear as a segmentation. So it's as if before God's unity is understood, God's separation existed. Kind of like it's fair to say, I guess, at least if I was having a conversation with a ancient Buddhist person, I would say I would say if I was having a conversation with Buddha, I would kind of point out to him that prior to enlightenment there was no such thing. That means before you woke up there was no such thing as sleep. Only after you woke up and you saw what waking up was, we could say there was the concept of sleep. Do you see? So it all has to do with how the individual has considered their self, and their self in the moment defines the axis of the validity of the world. This is why we have in business negotiations, the whole point is both parties are painting a picture. However, they want to paint a picture that both of them agree. You see, so that's the thing about war. Both the generals have to march their armies to the same position, but at the same time, it's based on how much they see that victory comes to you. This is what Sun Tzu in The Art of War said, the balance between heaven and earth. That means right now you might be a person in some unfortunate country where you have no time to actually wonder about who you are, and you have to just endlessly try to survive in the food chain of the concrete jungle. But There should be moments throughout. Leah, somebody who I followed his career before he was famous to some degree. Like I saw his early videos and I'm like, this guy's gonna make it, right? And and Chris D'Elia, in one of his gigs, he had this thing where he's like, some guy's not laughing at his jokes, and he's like, man, this guy's not laughing. Like he's getting bothered by that, and he's like, this guy's looking at me like I'm artwork in a gallery, like I'm the Mona Lisa or something, you know. And Chris D'Elia does an impression of the guy where it's as if the guy's looking at an artwork with his fingers on his chin, and is like, oh, I see what you did there. Anyways, I don't know how well I explained that, but pretty much what I'm saying is that you gotta observe life. This is something they don't teach because they can't teach, because nobody can know 100%, so it has to occur through the strength of your experiences. Let's say it like this: the scientist has to do an objective experiment to study an objective result of that experiment. Similarly, we say the philosopher has to do a subjective experiment and to study the result of that subjective experiment. But the mystic is the one who is doing a strange experiment. He's doing the experiment of trying to see what was there before experimentation, which eventually means the ideology is centering around the presence. You have to find yourself. Like, I remember I was talking to someone, and the person, he told me that he feels like he's different people with different people. And I told him, does that bother you? And the guy was like, yeah. And I told him it's one of those things where it's because you don't know who you are, you're worried about being who like a certain somebody. To be honest, it's a lack of attention to physical reality. I'm not a guy who's telling you, guys, forget the physical survival. Let's all go dance in happy spiritual land. Like, I'm not saying something like that. It's impossible. We have to literally be responsible for our manifestation. I'm telling you, you have to be responsible for your whole moment, because you're not responsible existentially for your whole moment. Your mind has to still entertain archetypes of hidden forces in the world doing things for you. The privilege of human life is a strange solidarity. You know, imagine like you going to a library and wanting to go work in one of those booths they have in a library where it's just like one room where you can, soundproof room, you can go in and study it. Right? So I want you to imagine human life is like that too. There is a certain way your DNA has been activated, and unless you become conscious of it, you cannot redirect it. What that means is if you don't leave the house, you're limited to the walls of the house. You have to let go of who you are now to truly experience who you will become. And it's a growing thing. That's the thing. When we realize the purpose of life is not who wears the shiniest armor. The purpose of life is in some sense to observe what is here and realize you have one lifetime to engage it. You have one lifetime to have a relationship with life in a certain time. We are, as a species, as a civilization, stuck in costume games. And I have been blessed in this life to travel to many different cultures. And in my youth, I was very blessed. Let me tell you why. Because I made mistakes in different cultures. I feel like I am kind of like the fool of an enlightened world, you know? It's like the fool went to heaven and the fool asked God, why am I here? And God was, because you were too foolish to do the wrong thing. Because we say a person is foolish when they don't do the right thing. But we can't say the person is foolish when they don't do the wrong thing. You see? The story of life is magnificent. It is how our eyes have opened to the unknown, and the unknown sculpts knowledge, and every day is new, and that is the power of life. It is a new breath. It is a new vision. Jonathan Swift tells us, vision is the art of seeing that which is invisible to others. And when you see dimensions of your world, when you realize nobody has your eyes, you have vision. You have vision that dares to be heard. And it is the roar of the species. 2019 is an incredible year. It is a year where failure is getting tired of failure. That is the year it is. And what that means is that you can choose, literally you can choose to either update the system or update the user of the system. It's like, trust me, it's all technology. How you use the technology and what technology you use and how your mind opens to the world and how much you care for there to even be a truth. Of course, it's so easy to be nihilistic. Being a nihilist is the easiest thing. Seeing there's nothing before everything, of course. But who can see that there's something here? Who? Life has changed. The winds of evolution command us now. Simply because we are conscious. If I was not conscious, if I did not know, if I did not see what this world actually was, I would not care. I would run into the pure lands of my imagination and dissolve from existence. There's been moments where I've been directed to the edge of the door of this life, but I did not enter. Not because I didn't know how to open the door, but simply because you cannot show me a world and expect me not to do anything about it. The moment, the problem of life is that it shows itself to us. And the phenomena of sight is so fascinating, and the phenomena of what the mind actually is so fascinating that it's like we are like cavemen trying to discover fire. That's how much the civilization knows. We have literally languages like fire. I remember I was in UK and I remember I was in the UK and Bettina was with me. Bettina was my girlfriend at the time. She was from Bordeaux, France. And I was living in UK for some time. And this is like 2011-ish. 2011, 10. Between those. And for a couple months I went to live in the UK, and I remember you have to find eternity in the temporary, because what else is there to look for? You have to let your mind play with the world. That's how intelligence truly evolves. I'm just remembering a moment where I was okay, I shouldn't say this on camera. Oh my god. I've been talking and this thing's been muted. Oh my god, how long has this been muted? Jesus. Time is a funny thing. So guys, this is strangely unfortunate, but the thing was accidentally muted, so I literally was speaking. I said this is the most important thing, and it was like the speaker was muted. Here, I'll say it like this. I was speaking about Dylan Thomas and how he was a good son. Dylan Thomas is a poet, and he has this poem where it's as if this is his last words to his father, and he's saying, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." What that means is it's like that sentence, rage against the dying of the light, is the notion that the sun is like the sun. We can only live for ourselves for a certain time. Then we just live for others and hope that the world sees our actions. Because I realize by the time I individually get to my heaven, it's as if I've missed out on the world. Whether you're holding the hand of your species or not, your species is holding your hand. You know? It's like whether you're holding her hand when you're walking, she's holding your hand. You know? Nature is blessed, and the gentle will get access to it, will get access to enlightened and elevated dimensions. Because we are creatures, we're like kind of scientifically, like we have a certain speed, but with consciousness, we have a direction. And so it's as if human life has evolved to a sort of velocity, a sort of the speed is going at a certain direction, where in that direction the speed finds definition. So in some sense, this is why I use the term pilots of consciousness. The pilot of consciousness was the being that was navigating their attention throughout the day. So my whole kind of use of language is to bring people to a position that they realize you are a direct experiencer. You are piloting your intelligence. Eventually, there are two paths, there's two ways you can say the ancient mind saw enlightenment. They actually saw it in one way, but I'll say it like this. You either go towards silence and you get enlightened by emptiness, or you go towards advanced communication and you get enlightened by infinity. Like infinity becomes your teacher. Western society, infinity is your teacher. All your metaphysics comes down to infinity. Because you think you're finite, the only ambition left is to be infinite. What that means is the secular society has actually made its subconscious purpose to be God. It's as if, I'm not joking, the atheist subconsciously doesn't want to get rid of God, wants to be God. You cannot have your attention on something and eventually not want to be it. This is why they say the people around you are your environment and are your mind. This is why the most important thing about friendship is seeing the authenticity and the honesty of the life form. That means your best friends are those who could be like children on the playground when you were young. They are themselves. They have not been rejected by the world so much to give in, to submit. You see, it's kind of strange. You see, the word Islam means submission. It means submission to the divine will, pretty much. So in all Abrahamic societies, the world, it's not just empty space, it's also the intentions of the divine. Okay? And the divine is that which is unknown. So religion was a way of telling people, like, all right, this world is unknown, but someone's moving it. Kind of like the kid goes and asks, "Dad, who's moving the world?" And the dad's like, "Damn." And the dad's like, science, son. Science is moving the world. And the kid's like, who's moving science? And the dad's like, I don't know, son. You have disgraced your father at the age of 8. There is a life here that must be lived, simply. I think every human being on the planet can agree, we can all agree that we are energetic beings. We can all agree that the food we eat, because we eat food, we understand that we are a sort of energetic system of intelligence. Now, to be even able to acknowledge the concept of intelligence is a crucial one. It's as if we have, do you know how many people on this planet are right now living with beliefs about themselves that are limiting their reach? Do you understand how hilarious that is? That's like in an empty universe on a rock in the middle of nowhere, you caring about the opinion of the other. Do you see? It's like, who knows? Who knows that they know? And very few people will raise their hand in this classroom of humanity. Archetypes, archetypes, archetypes. That's another way of saying fire, fire, fire. Symbology is very crucial to study. I find the writer of the Da Vinci Code did a great service to humanity to evoke inspiration back into the language that defines the limits of reality. What if I told you that you think you're a thought right now, but your thoughts change all the time? What if I told you you think life can be a snapshot of an emotion, but your emotions change all the time? So on some level, your task in this life is how you respond to change. That's kind of like what Charles Darwin meant, evolution. It's as if, but evolution kind of makes you a bit lazy. You know, you're like, even if I don't do anything, I'm evolving, right? It's like, no, your evolution has to do with engagement. Engagement has to do with clarity. Clarity has to do with honesty. Honesty has to do with the conquering of fear. The conquering of fear has to do with the conquering of desire. The conquering of desire has to do with the acknowledgement of self. The acknowledgement phenomena, you don't acknowledge it as a conceptual form. So it's like this technology of your heartbeat, not the technology of a mathematical language. You see, because any words, to be honest, everything is mathematical language. All words can be numbers too. Mathematics is so crucial because we see in mathematics, we get the story mindset. You cannot be a character in a story unless the character is separate from the world to have a setting, right? So in some sense, we had to have that mathematical innovation of from emptiness there coming the number one, and then from number one coming another one where it became the number two. So it's as if number one is cloning itself and a bunch of its clones are joining together to be number two. Do you see? And number two is cloning itself, and a bunch of cloning versions of itself are becoming, for example, the next numbers. And so what I'm trying to say is that in some sense there is an integrative acknowledgement that is required about intelligence that makes you drop the towel of fighting the abyss. For me, it was weird kind of being introduced to the idea of spirituality, because it was also the first one of the early moments where I was being introduced to an idea. And it's very funny. Before, it's as if I thought, how can I tell you, like up until 2011, I was I was still caught into the language simulation. And I was caught into it in a way where I felt what I saw was the only truth. And because what I saw was the only truth, the world had to happen that way. And it was a foolish arrogance of my youth. And this foolish arrogance is something you got to catch early. Because when you catch early, you give freedom to the inner structure of the creature, the human being. I want you to think that every person you know is an effort of your world. And the success of man is the success of the world. Because who else is here to see this world? We are our own greatest audience. And this is what happens. Literally, if you are in a character, as a character, let's say you're some kid in a world where literally the world has not cared for this kid to such a degree, this kid is dying from starvation. Imagine you went to a third world country, you saw there's a kid about to die from starvation on the ground with his face on the ground, and you're like, this kid's gonna die. You run as this tourist to save that kid, and you suddenly turn around the kid to see the face of the kid, and you see it's the face of you, it's your face when you were a kid. That's the power of it. Great movements start from great conversations. That is the task of the modern generations. There's this whole thing of the whole millennials like kind of messing things up. And I'll tell you, that is so nonsense. Things were messed up from a long time ago. You must find access to what I would say is the uncommon wit of the moment. The uncommon wit of the moment is this consideration that every moment harbors within it a genius angle. What that means is, let's say, for example, what's a good example? I'm just trying to point out that we're living like characters in a story, and the mind will evolve naturally on its own to a point where it's kind of like how ancient Vedic societies would say nirvikalpa samadhi. The experience opens up the evolution of the existential possibility. So literally you are not limited, because the limited cannot exist without the limitless. Therefore the limitless is always there. So the unknown becomes your power source. Right now your power source for your intellect and intelligence is from the known. You need to see things through certain systems to be certain of it. But we have to wonder about the direct experience and how much the experiment changes the nature of what is observed. That means we are a sort of energetic reaction. The fact that we are trying to find things out through experimentation means it's like our influence is like a chemical, and the thing we're experimenting is like a chemical, and this makes a totally new chemical reaction. What that means is you cannot touch something without changing it. That's kind of like the revelation of the Midas touch, that on some level everybody is like Midas unless they change their mind. Midas is the metaphor of pretty much the kind of powerful person in civilization. The person who everything he touches becomes ultimate. Therefore he's realizing it's like Midas was a strange archetype of a kind of character who he was in hell because everything he touched went to heaven. It was as if he was alone in power. This is the higher levels of power. That means you do not truly understand power in this dimension. In this dimension, it's like a soccer field we're in. It's a football field we're in. This material universe. But the football field is not the rest of civilization. It's not the rest of what's out there. And so true power, you think power, I'll tell you the story which will just be a home run. Just a second, guys. I need to hold for a second. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Had to take a quick intermission there. I wanted to tell you the story. I was speaking about the archetype of power, and the story is about this enlightened woman, this incredibly enlightened woman that is not just externally beautiful, but internally she has attained ultimate beauty. And so this woman is walking in this river, this enlightened sage, and as she's walking in this river, she suddenly sees this giant crystal ruby-like thing. And she just picks it up and she's like, what a beautiful looking stone. I'll just hold it. I'll just hold on to this. And this sage is walking in this kind of stream, gentle stream or whatever, right? And she gets to a part of the stream where it's nearby a town road. And then there is a town road there. And in the town road, coincidentally, the moment where she's crossing, like she's walking in the stream, going up there, this man suddenly sees the jewel in the hand of this beautiful enlightened sage. And so he runs. It's as if for a second this dude's cared, like he went to buy bread and take it home. And it's like in the middle of it, he sees this random lady with this jewel in her hand. And it's as if like what happens is that his mind gets possessed by future value. Literally, the guy's intelligence generates an image of himself in the future that makes him possessively behave in the moment. So what happens is this guy just instantly runs up to this girl, to this enlightened sage, and says to her, says something like, he's trying to be polite, but he's saying it with a tone as if like, he's like, ma'am, please give me that stone. That's it. That's all he says. And he says it with such an intense tone as if like, please give it to me or I'll take it. The enlightened sage looks at him and says, here, and instantly gives the stone to her. Excuse me. She instantly gives the stone to him as if here, if it makes you happy, here. And the guy takes this stone as if like a little kid who's just like found the cookie jar, you know. he takes this little thing. He takes the ruby, smushes it up in the bread to hide it, and runs home, gets home, puts the smushed up like bread around the crystal on the table, and he opens it, and he holds the ruby in his hand, and he's like, wow, what kind of a treasure I found today. It's as if he's putting the voice of his conscience and morality to the side, and he's looking at the treasure he's found in his hand. Suddenly the man just gets incredibly shocked and sad. And he realizes he has attained the treasure of an inferior world. It's as if you found treasure, but you found it in the wrong world. And so this is the moral of the story, where the man asks himself, wow, and he says the true treasure is not this rock, it's how easy it was for that enlightened sage to let go of it. Do you see? She had the treasure because she could let go of the treasure. And what I'm trying to say is the archetype of power driven by the animalistic desire eventually reaches a point where you have the power, but then you see those are powerful who have let go. It's as if your power becomes the trash. It's like they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's as if you're getting access to the trash dimension of that moment. To be honest, I'm something that gave great momentum to my inspiration to give these talks was I heard this scholar named Terence McKenna say what he was saying, something like the poets have failed us, in this lecture he gave opening the doors of creativity. And He said the poets have failed us, implying when we say the poets have failed us, it means the failure of all the artists, philosophers, and anyone whose task it was to introduce the new. What that means is reality from levels of overwhelming psychology has gone more and more civilized, but eventually its civility is still being directed to another savageness. It's all about intensity of the quality of experience, which is the fruits of a higher intelligence. The higher intelligence is simply, it's like whether you like it or not, you're standing on a terrace that is higher than the other floors. And that's in some sense what I realize vision is. The only thing that can, in some sense, we say everything's limited to the DNA of the person, but the vision can change DNA. What that means is it doesn't change the DNA, it changes how a part of the DNA approaches itself, which overall changes it. You know, so like micro changes are changing the whole cosmos in some sense. There's this book which I haven't finished writing, but I've started it. It's called The Masterpiece. Like the word the, and then the word master, and then a space, and then the word peace, spelled P-E-A-C-E. The Masterpiece. Peace has to do with the fragmentation of the psyche into various modes of accepting how the world is. On some level, we hear Aristotle saying, it is the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. We see people like René Descartes saying that at least in your life once you must doubt all things. We see the Western Enlightenment has elevated itself through doubting and in some sense constantly, effortlessly trying. This is why one of the ideals of Western society is work hard. Like all these successful people on these channels like Impact Theory, which is a great channel, like people on there, they're like, how do I say it to you? It's like these people are just saying literally you gotta concentrate. In some sense not meant for that world. What that means is it's like imagine suddenly joining a group of people who are having a conversation who are close friends. It's as if you have entered from another world, the world they have all mutually built together. You know what I mean? So there is the subjective landscape is very crucial. It's very important to study it, you know? What that means is how else does the world move behind your eyes? It's as if in front of your eyes, sure, we can say it's all physical in front of the eyes, but behind the eyes, is it all physical? When you close your eyes, is there just visibility moving, you know, not moving, or do you see that thought moves? But what is thought? It comes across, I at least have put it in the mode of a subtler plane of abstraction. That means literally I am giving levels to intelligence. Therefore, the notion of people saying that they're the person who wrote the IQ test, who made the IQ test, had a very low IQ because that person thought that in those like challenges towards a sort of geometrical intellect, there comes it's kind of like the IQ test is another way of saying it's a way of trying to see if you fit into a certain program. It has nothing to do with your intelligence because intelligence is unique. You see, it's like we have one educational system and then 8 billion people with different DNAs and different eyes all have different sorts of intelligence, have to all adjust to this educational system. What that means is the current society right now, the condition is due to the lack of evolution of the educational system. I am telling you, it's scary. It's like, imagine somebody dressed like a Viking back in the day. You know, imagine like we had a time traveling machine and we went and got a Viking and we brought that Viking and put the Viking in the classroom to be a teacher, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like that teacher could give the proper notes to you, but it's still the way reality has been designed is it's psychologically arrogant to various structures of intelligence. They don't care. This is the honest truth. What you don't care about, you don't update. Right? So if the educational hasn't updated, it means some people who are working there haven't cared to challenge the fundamental ideas of what it means to know. We are no longer, we're reaching a point where social social activity is evolving out of the traditional educational system. What that means is people right now have access to data for free. So what they will ask themselves, why should I go to, for example, a certain, I'm saying that if there are people who wonder why children, like especially in harsh neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods, like let me tell you what's going on. The world is a game of respect, and to be able to respect something, you got to be able to look through its eyes. And so anybody who seeks value in a sort of system, trust me, I'm telling you, this is like, especially for all those people who have a sort of dimension of immigration in their eyes, those people, how can I tell you, the world is divided into various rooms where various kinds of people have accepted various ways things have value. So the issue of civilization's efficiency is not that we haven't found the right technology yet, it's that we are telling the wrong story to ourselves. And this is why we haven't updated, because our value system has not updated and has not changed. That means it's like, it doesn't matter for me, like another kid can be born, and if the kid tries to fit into the system, I'm like, you're as old as everyone else. The eyes of the new have a value, and the value of them is being reduced to dirt. Artists are being pushed to are being pushed aside. Do you know this? That means civilization has stopped caring about the advancement of the inner reality into the outer. Conversations must begin. The greatest thing you can do in this life is not to donate to a charity. That is a good thing, but it's not the greatest thing. The greatest thing is starting a conversation in your environment that makes the environment wonder about what else it could be. And in that what else, the environment begins to consider, okay, I'm happening in one way right now, so what is the other way that the whole system can be designed? And that other way doesn't mean it has to be instantly applied, it just means the vision has to come into place. It's like before we know where we're going, we have to have a sort of direction. So Mr. Within is saying the direction of modern civilization is take people into computers. Literally, if people didn't change right now, we're going to all end up being a part of a computer. And it's going to be weird. You know? Imagine you come home and your cousin's like, yo, cuz, I just connected my brain to this database, you know? This company had this option where they could plant a chip in your brain, and you'd be like, Jesus Christ, you're not my cousin anymore. You have become some other mutation of your own value. This is why humility is important, because humility means really that's when your ears are open. Trust me, if you have bias upon this world, your ears close. That's the problem with prejudice. You know, it's as if somebody says something and you take the words for the word value rather than the face value of how the word was used. Because for me, it's kind of like, you know how ninjas throw? Ninjas throw like those, what do you call them? Those kind of star kind of things, star knives. You know? So when ninjas throw that thing, you know, I don't know the traditional term. Okay, here, let me Google this. Ninja weapon names. Oh, there we go. When you throw a shuriken, okay, when you throw a shuriken, when the ninja throws a shuriken, that's kind of how language is. You throw it at a certain speed, at a certain angle, at a certain momentum, and that angle, speed, and momentum has to do with what kind of person you are more than who, for example, the political correct society is judging or whatever. What is this? It's a theatrical performance. It's as if we did not realize when we gave too much freedom, we gave freedom for the inefficient technologies to continue as well. But how do we filter the efficient? And there's no way. So literally we are stuck in a kind of modern civilization where we have realized you can't give power to the individual, but because the individual has this conqueror complex, because we're animals fundamentally, so we see that humans cannot lead humans. And then we realize at the same time, if there was no leadership, we would still be animals. So what's the point of civilization? So we need to have governments. But it's as if those governments, their systems, or how should they be adjusted? So I'm trying to think if in the future politics becomes simply a computer where the politicians are just getting voted to be programmers in this computer. And then the whole governmental structure applies. To be honest, we don't know. We don't know how much this theatrical, it's like we're caught in the middle of a Shakespeare play, but the Shakespeare play and the actors in it are evolving, and this play is going on endlessly, as if Shakespeare's like, when is this play gonna end? Like one of Shakespeare's friends in the audience is like, when is this play gonna end? And Shakespeare's just like, that's the point, the play will never end. And so various children constantly are born and they become actors in this play, and it goes on and on and on and on until some point intelligence updates itself and wonders why the fuck it's existing. And that's when liberation comes. It's like, to be honest, you haven't looked in a mirror properly unless you get enlightened instantly. That's the only way. This is the hilarious thing. This is something that all these people who are in reverence of yogic thought will realize that, listen, these people who thought they were spiritual, they entered a divine illusion. It's as if in the eyes of God they were wrong. They weren't alone, and the universe wasn't a lonely place. To be honest, it takes a rare mind to be able to contemplate emptiness, because that will be realized as inactivity. We have people like Lao Tzu that say the action through inaction. Lao Tzu was a Chinese philosopher with a really long beard, implying the incredible wisdom he had. And so Lao Tzu paradox in an incredible existential way, pretty much. And what he means by that is that you don't realize not only the world in front of your eyes is changing, you who are seeing this world with a certain value are changing. Therefore, fundamentally, we are attention in a changing world. This attention in a changing world appears to itself through the design of a biological system. You know, we cannot ignore this body. This body is evolution's design. It's like somebody's like, what's the point of my life? And then all his ancestors, their souls are from young clouds. Like, did he just say that? Did he just say that? Does this kid not realize what we lived for? There's a scene in an incredible show where I was fascinated by the writing, not per se that the writing of the show was genius. And it's this show called Attack on Titan, and I think it's the third season, an episode in the third season. And what is going on is that humanity, it's as if humanity has been kind of cornered into these giant walls to save themselves from these giant man-eating kind of mutant creatures. And so pretty much it's a giant epic. Like after Jack and the Beanstalk, I think Attack on Titan comes next. You know? Maybe Gulliver's Travels or something is there too. You know, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that There's a scene where there's a commander named Erwin. All his men are lined up, and all his men are the new scouts, so they're untrained soldiers, all freaking out that they're all gonna die right now. And Commander Erwin goes there, and he's like, something I learned from this character's archetype was that he realized he had nothing to fear when he was honest. His strength came from his honesty. It's strange. Some people have that. Commander Erwin looks at his crew who are paralyzed by fear. He says, this is our last mission, our last operation, and we are all going to charge at these giants who have surrounded us as the last of humanity's great effort. And he tells them that in some sense, of course I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember it verbatim, but he says something that as he says that, he says, while we do this, we are all going to die and be a distraction, while this elite soldier is going to go from behind and kill the main bad guy. Okay, and so and so Commander Erwin says the operation, and suddenly one of the terrified soldiers says, "Are you saying that we are all riding to our deaths right now? And whatever we do, we're gonna die?" And Captain Erwin is like, "So God." It's in Japanese. He says, "Yes." You know? And so the guy says, "So you are saying it's better to fight than run away?" And all of this is meaningless? The guy is asking. And Commander Erwin says, "Yes, we will all die. And yes, it is better to fight." Of course, I'm saying it in my own way. He says it is better to fight. And he says something like, but if it does it mean life is meaningless? It doesn't mean life is meaningless. Our conscious free will in a cruel world, when it rages, when it truly lives, that is the greatest thing. That is the greatest blow to the enemy. So he's looking at his soldiers and he's saying, we're all going to die at some point as human beings. Right now we find ourselves in a cruel position of the world where we're all going to instantly die. And he's saying to his soldiers, rage. It's our rebellion against the cruel world to live with and to march, to charge. That is the nature of the human being. We don't just stand around. We immediately gather, in some sense, process data and march, and go forth, advance, advance, advance. Eventually you will advance to a point where you don't need thoughts to advance. And eventually your moment becomes, it's kind of like your archetypes become a living thing. Right now, Carl Jung brought forth to some degree in his own days to the audiences of psychology at the time, that in some sense the archetype is an image, right? But in some sense that image, based on how you live, can transform into a living reality. That means there's a way of being intelligent on this planet that has nothing to do with language, which instantly means it's not about what ideas you know. It's about how the experience and the quality of the experience of the moment is present. It's awakening of the real being in a real world before all this illusion takes your attention away. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I don't know, I'm feeling pretty chatty today. I might give more of these talks later. Thanks for tuning in.